Another optimization, and something that's been bothering me throughout the course, is the fact that we don't really have any type of error handling for this location request right now since we've integrated it. Right now, if we get an error from location request, well, frankly, nothing's going to happen. If I go over here inside of my terminal, right, and I go to the process that's running the functions and I just close that function down, well, now basically, anytime I search for anything else, I'm going to be getting an error. And that error isn't going to be caught anywhere. That error isn't doing anything. If we console.log res here, what we're going to see is that, well, something is going wrong, right? And what's going wrong is that we don't have a network connection. That's the first thing that's going wrong. We're not getting a result. We're going directly into the catch statement. So if we go over here to our context, well, we should be getting an error, right? Console.log error. And what is that error going to tell us? Oh, network request failed. But the network request failing didn't really yield anything. We just have an empty screen, a massive empty screen. And although we're setting the error, we're not really doing anything with it. And so that becomes problematic. So if we take this error, right, and we went over here to our feature, and we went into restaurants, screens, and then the restaurant screen itself, and we open that up. Right now, we're not handling anything with the restaurants error. We're not even importing it. And on top of that, we're not even using our location context error here. So location context, we need that. We can't do much in terms of getting a location error if we're not using our location context. So it's important to pull that error as well. And so we'll call that location error, and we'll have an error and a location error. And with both of these, we should be able to determine if an error is going on. So if we go over here and let's import text from our typography text. So let's do typography and let's do /text.component. And if we take our text component and we went over here right above our restaurant list and we said, if you have an error or you have a location error, right? If you have either of these, if either of these has a value, location error, well then what we want to do is we want to show text of variant error, and we want to say /text, something went wrong retrieving the data. Something went wrong retrieving the data. And if we do that, well, now we have a nice looking text error. But we could go a bit further. One thing we need to do here is we could stand to have a bit of space around it. So let's add a spacer. And let's say that the spacer goes from the left large. And so now it's indenting properly. So something went wrong retrieving the data. Well, now let's say that I went over here and I started my server, right? So I went over into the terminal 3 and I started my server. And I'm just going to be working with mock information. I'm not doing anything special here. But if I go ahead and I reload, well, now I'm getting mock information back. But now if I search for something that doesn't work, something went wrong retrieving the data. So we're getting an error, but the list is still populated. Should it still be populated? Well, no. That's kind of a broken flow right there. Now that we have this error check on the location and potentially the restaurant list error, what we want to do is we want to take this and we want to say const has error is equal to if either of these values is valid. And if you have an error, what we want to do is we want to not render the restaurant list. So if you have an error, we're not going to render out the restaurant list. Now that said, whenever you fill in something that doesn't have a value, what's going to happen here is anytime the error has been set, when we get a result, we're not resetting the error. So we need to make sure that we reset the error every time we retrieve a result. And this is both true for restaurants as well as location. So in restaurants, when we get results, we want to make sure that we reset the error. And that way, if we reload over here, now, if I were to search for a place that doesn't exist, I'm going to get an error. We can't retrieve data for that place. And if I search for Antwerp, well, now we're going to get information for Antwerp. Now we're going to get information for San Francisco. Now we're not going to get information at all. And so we're handling error scenarios. Now there's one more thing that we specifically need to handle here, because this obviously in mock mode will work, but what about in live mode? If we were to swap out is mock for false, will this still work? Well, let's take a look. If we reload here and we said San Francisco, and then we did Antwerp, and then we did some random string. Oh, so now we're getting an error because we don't have the information available. There are no results for this place. Okay, great. That's amazing. But now, let's say that we were in live mode and we did search for a place that had results, right? Like Antwerp. Now, what if I told you that if we deleted our API key from our functions runtime config, what would happen if we got an invalid API key error? Well, let's take a look. So I've gone ahead and emptied out my key over here. And what we need to do now is we need to make sure that we restart the server so that it takes the most recent config. Then we'll refresh over here and we should see something happen, no? Oh, something went wrong retrieving the data. So we're catching error scenarios now. Amazing. This helps the user have a visual indication of, hey, we're not really in a state in which we have information. Something's going wrong. We don't necessarily know what. Try again later. We could customize the message here, right? If I search for Antwerp, obviously it's not going to work because the geocode request does not have a valid API key. And so the user is now warned that, hey, the information is unavailable. And oh no, our map is breaking. So obviously we do not have robust code when it comes to our maps feature, especially in error scenarios. So if we go over here to source and we go over to features, map, screens, map screen, what we need to do is we need to make this a bit more robust because we may not have a longitude latitude, right? So what we need to do is introduce a bit of safety in this feature. So what we're going to do is we're going to call this map. And what we're going to do is at the bottom here, we're going to say export const map screen is going to be a separate component that's going to do something a bit special. It's going to pull in the context of location ahead of time. And what it's going to say is if we do not have a location, we're going to return null. Otherwise, we're going to return the map. And by doing this, we now have the safety of returning the map when we need to. Now, map obviously is overriding with this. Let's call it restaurant map. And we'll just render restaurant map down here. And when we reload, what we'll be able to see is over here. First of all, we have to return null as a body. And we'll see that, well, we're not returning anything. So what we can do now is we can actually customize this and we can say safe area / safe area. We could do a bunch of different things. We could, for instance, just render a map view that doesn't have any type of usage. We could do something like this where we have map view and we just say longitude 0, latitude 0. And by doing this, we'll just render the holistic map view. Let's remove the safe area. What we'll see here is we're just going to render the map without any information. And there's one more nuance here we might have forgotten. If we go look up here at the restaurant map, it's taking in navigation. But the map screen is the one being passed in to the navigation component. And so because of that, if we go look at app navigation or app navigator, we can see here map screen is the one being fed as the component. So map screen is actually the one that is getting the navigation component. What we could do here is we could say navigation is equal to navigation to the restaurant map. And now we've guaranteed that the restaurant map will also get a navigation. We could have also used the hook here, but the point being is you have to pay attention to where the navigation is being passed in, either pass it down or use a hook. And now that we've done all of this, we've introduced safety into the application and error state management, which is super vital.